Welcome to the SoccerWire podcast for October 16th, 2019, the weekly news show that focuses on the state of youth soccer and player development in the United States. I'm Mark Serber, and today we'll get into this week's top news. Charles Boehm and I will take on the Development Academy versus high school debate, and there's news trickling out of Major League Soccer regarding its annual combine. The hat trick episode of the SoccerWire podcast starts now. We start this week the same way we start every week, with SoccerWire managing editor Quinn Castile, who's here to tell us about the hottest stories coming off the SoccerWire press. Quinn, always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure as well. First off today, we have the U.S. men's national team with a really disappointing loss Tuesday night against Canada in the CONCACAF Nations League. The big story was Christian Pulisic being pulled off in the 60th minute due to flu-like symptoms. 3 minutes after he was pulled off, the U.S. conceded their first goal, ended up conceding another one late in the match, and lost 2-0. Really disappointing loss for the USA on Tuesday night.
I really don't think that it was flu-like symptoms. I think that Berhalter made the decision to pull Pulisic off because he didn't think he was producing, and it was certainly a gamble to take, but I think that this is how the Federation is deciding to spin it. However, we're going to leave it there because this is such a big topic that we're going to dedicate it to the D block, and we're going to bring everybody here at SoccerWire in on the conversation. So we'll hold off on that, Quinn, and we'll move on to story number 2.
Story number 2 is Generation Adidas Cup qualifying taking place this past weekend. MLS academies in action trying to qualify for the prestigious Generation Adidas Cup. 2 clubs that really played well this weekend at the U17 level were Chicago Fire Academy. They went 3-0, perfect record, didn't concede a single goal over the course of their 3 wins. They beat last year's champion Seattle Sounders, Minnesota United, and LA Galaxy. The other club that went perfect with 3 wins on the weekend was Real Salt Lake. They earned wins over Philadelphia Union, New England Revolution, and DC United Academy.
And the Generation Adidas Cup, Quinn, is such an awesome tournament because these MLS teams play only against other MLS teams, and then once they qualify, they move on to the group stage, which not only features the other MLS sides that qualified for the tournament, but also academies from around the world, the likes of the top Mexican academies, from the English Premier League, from all over. So a really amazing tournament that is run side by side alongside the MLS Academy's normal Development Academy season. Staying in the Development Academy, you've got a story from the girls' side.
Third story is over the weekend. The Girls DA Cup, inaugural season of the DA Cup, continued all over the country. There were some great matchups everywhere, but one matchup I'd like to bring up is Solar SC and FC Dallas met up in Group 3 of the top flight, the Red Division. These are 2 of the best clubs in the Girls DA. Youth national team players all over the field. They split 4 games between each other across the 4 age groups. FC Dallas won at the U15 and the U19 levels, while Solar took the U16 and the U17 age groups. The only game out of the 4 that wasn't a blowout one way or the other was in the U16 age group, and it was just a thrilling game with some great talent on the field showcased in that one. At the U16 age group, Solar's Tyler Iskrig outdueled FC Dallas's Taylor Zadrewski in a thrilling 3-2 game. Iskrig put Solar on top 2-0 in the opening 12 minutes. Zadrewski comes back and answers for FC Dallas with 2 goals of her own later in the first half. Then, 78th minute, Iskrig hits the game winner and completes the hat trick, and Solar took that one 3-2. So you and I both saw them at the DA playoffs last year, and it's just 2 really good clubs and just a lot of talent on the field at all times between those 2.
Yeah, and talking about the Development Academy last year when they had the U16-17 combined age group, FC Dallas lost in the semifinals, and Solar went on to win the competition, which they had won by a mile. Going into the final game, they had already scored 219 goals before beating Lone Star, but with the likes of Alexis Misimo and Trinity Byers on that U17 team and all the talent with the likes of Zadrewski, who's probably going to come up, and the other players on that FC Dallas squad, I would pay attention to those Dallas derbies.
Definitely. I'd like to see Zadrewski get a call-up with one of the youth national teams. She was just so impressive at the playoffs last year. I was shocked to see that she hadn't received a call-up. And it's hard. There's only so many roster spots to go around, but she's certainly somebody that I think is deserving.
Quinn Castile, always on top of it. To read these stories and more, be sure to check out SoccerWire.com. Time now to hear from our sponsor, PlayerMaker. And when we return, Charles Boehm will join me as we tackle the age-old battle between the Development Academy and high school. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the lightweight device worn by soccer players on each foot to record every touch of the ball and every step. Within minutes of training or games, players and coaches get a report on every touch, including left and right foot usage, possessions, passing, and dozens more. PlayerMaker is the most holistic player performance approach that's never been seen before. Visit SoccerWire.com/PlayerMaker to schedule a demo. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast, your one-stop shop for weekly news, headlines, and in-depth discussion on the biggest issues facing the youth game today. I'm joined now by Charles Boehm, a regular SoccerWire contributor and an editor at MLSsoccer.com. Charles, always an honor to be in your presence.
You as well, Mark. Even more so.
Coming from you, I can't tell you how much that means. Charles, usually I introduce the topic and tee you up because I love to just sit back and listen to that hard drive of soccer knowledge of yours. But today, I want to take the soapbox first because this is a topic I have a very strong opinion about, and I'm about to have a lot more people in the soccer world hate me than already do. And let me tell you, I'm already not very well liked.
Say no more, fam. I'm going to lay you a nice through ball into acres of open space behind the back line.
All right. So, today's topic, Development Academy players not being allowed to play high school. Now, this is an argument that has taken place between the Federation and high schools, between coaches, and especially on our favorite place for all arguments, the Twitter sphere. Now, let me start by saying that there is a place for high school soccer in this country. When I played high school soccer, it was some of the best times and most important games of my life. And the fact of the matter is that if you can't play high school soccer either because if you can't play in the Development Academy because either you just aren't developed enough at the moment, or you live in a place that doesn't have it, or you don't have the resources, or you just don't want to even play in the Development Academy and go through a 10-month season, then high school soccer is a wonderful place to be. Many coaches will tell you, if you are good, we will find you. So I do think that high school soccer is very important, and it still serves a very important role in this country. But at the same time, if you want to be a professional, if you want to be a national team player, or even just a college player, then the DA is 100 times better than high school in terms of development. You are getting better training, better resources, better facilities, and you are learning how to play in a professional environment. Now, I understand that in the Development Academy, there are times where a team does win a game 7-0, and it's not that meaningful competition that everybody talks about. But the bottom line is it's still two teams going through the process, trying to play the right way. Now, when I played high school soccer, once again, my glory days, which I now realize I wasn't even that good back then, But the bottom line is, when I played high school soccer, we would go up against teams where we were more worried about getting out alive than we were worried about winning the game, because you were going up against teams that you knew had no real formal coaching, that were often football rejects who still wanted to play a sport, be athletic and macho, and they wanted to hit something. And you would go into games and you would be scared. And so, these games were not worth the cost. They were not helpful to your development. So to the argument that you are missing out on a great experience by playing high school, you know what? Of course you are. Of course you are. I think anybody who's played high school soccer can say that, those were some of the best times playing in front of your best friends. But you know what? If you want to be a top player, if you want to play on the national team, you have to make sacrifices. And this missing high school soccer is just one of many sacrifices that they're already making. I can't tell you how many events I've been at where 15-year-old girls in the Development Academy are doing homework on a Saturday night in the lobby of a Courtyard by Marriott because they are choosing to be there to work on their craft when all their friends are probably out at the movies or having a great time. So this is one more sacrifice that they have to make. And so I think that the schools, going back to last week's podcast when Chris Hummer brought up the fact that a mother called distraught because the AD of a high school wouldn't let her go to the national signing day because she didn't play for the high school team, I think schools should understand the commitment that they're making, and they should honor that, because at the end of the day, if a player goes to a great school, if a player goes to the national team, guess what they're a product of? Your high school, and they should be honored for that. Finally, to those that say that one of the biggest development things that you miss out on by not playing in high school is not only being with your friends or learning to fight for the name on your jersey or whatnot, but that you're not learning how to play in front of large crowds, because we all know that Development Academy regular season games only have a few scouts and some parents, and that you aren't getting that. But let me tell you this, SoccerWire podcast listeners. First of all, when you go to the showcases, that is the environment that you need to learn to play in. They make it as professional as possible. When you go into Oceanside in the Development Academy playoffs and showcase, you walk through a huge tunnel that tells you about the history of the Development Academy, the winners, the national team players that have come out of it. You feel the weight of what you're working for. You go and you play on some of the most professional fields. You have maybe 100 college scouts standing around, and you have a 4-camera setup streaming games to what the 2018 Development Academy show playoffs, showcase, and finals had over 1.4 million viewers. Now, if you're playing in front of that, you are learning how to play in front of big crowds. And I think even on some pitch far away that nobody knows about, but with 100 college scouts around, to me that's more daunting and something that you have to learn to play in front of rather than playing in front of all your friends. So the large crowd thing or not, I think is a little ridiculous. I talked to Luchi Gonzalez when he was in the Development Academy at FC Dallas, now of course promoted to head coach, has done a wonderful job. And I asked him once, I said, have you addressed the fact that your kids tomorrow are going to be playing in front of the cameras? And he said, no, absolutely not. Why would I care? Because you need to be willing to fight and battle and scrape and play with whether there's 10 people or 10,000 people. And the bottom line is that the professionals, the boys and girls who want to be top college players, national team players, professional players, or just want to be the very best that they can be, the majority of the work that they're going to do to become that isn't going to be in hundreds of thousands of people. It's going to be in the shadows. And once they step out, they're able to perform in front of that kind of crowd. So I think missing out on playing in front of large high school crowds is just a ridiculous argument. So that's what I think, and I think it's absolutely right if you are in the DA that you should forego playing high school soccer. Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I just, these are my feelings, and I just think that this is a stupid, worn down argument.
You make some good points there, Mark. My question to you is, so you're laying out in a country of 360 plus million people with millions of teenage players, you're laying out two paths, A or B. You're in the Development Academy or you're not, right? And if you're not in the Development Academy, whether it's because someone thought you weren't good enough in their limited wisdom as a talent evaluator, or you don't have the money to get into your local pay-for-play youth club, or the political vagaries that we all know are rife in our youth soccer system, led to you being on the wrong side of someone's list, or you live in a remote area where there's not 5 development academy programs for you to choose from. So screw you. So again, this comes back to one of my pet peeves, which is we don't know what we're missing. And we're limiting, with this dogmatic approach to things, we're limiting the options for millions of kids. To me, a successful player development system makes as many pathways forward towards the next level, whatever that may be, as possible for as many kids as possible. I mean, we already have an enormous issue rumbling under the surface of elite girls soccer about whether the national team scouts are pointedly refusing to scout one national league that's not U.S. Soccer sponsored in order to build up the appeal of the national league that is U.S. Soccer sponsored. We have these incredible, pissing contests over geography and infrastructure and authority, and so now we're gonna intensify those even further. Again, you make a good point, but my question is, what about the kids that don't fit into that mold? What about the kids who don't have the same choices of the kids that are the ideal DA kids? And I don't think that we are recognizing the unmet potential, the unknown potential of what's out there, the kids for whom high school soccer may be their only option. Who's looking at them? Who's deciding that they're not good enough? It's easy to find a high school game where there's crap soccer being played, where there's crap coaching, where players are being physically run into the ground. But look deeper. That's the easy thing to notice. What about all the kids that are balling, that are showing potential? How are we getting the game more accessible to them? I don't think it's a 10-year-old debate about high school versus DA. I don't think we're advancing the larger interests of the American soccer developmental pathway.
Well, I mean, I know it makes for bad audio, but the fact of the matter is I agree with everything you just said. The only thing I'm saying is that I think that if you have the ability to go into the DA and you can't play high school because of it, that you should play in the DA. But for those players that need to play in high school for the reasons that you mentioned, yeah, we need to do a better job of finding them, of scouting them, of giving them their day to get a chance to go on the right way. The pathways need to be better. Look, a lot of people make a lot about how there's so many leagues that it's hard to kind of keep up. That's fine with me. If there wants to be 4 to 5 amateur leagues or semi-pro leagues or even call themselves professional leagues, I'm fine with that because I want everybody to have a place to play, a place to get better, a place to find their paths. Sure, there are defined paths that get you there quicker, but I want everybody to have their opportunities, their chances. Do we need to do a better job of watching and scouting high school games and high school players? Absolutely. My only argument is that if you're a player who has the opportunity to play in the DA versus playing in high school, then you should be playing in the DA. And that the high schools, the coaching staffs at those high schools, the administrations at those high schools should understand that and understand your reasons. Not my argument and my issues are not with the fact that those players who are in those high schools, who are in those games, deserve to be seen.
But we have so many gatekeepers in this country. There's so many hurdles and gateways that people have to pass through to show that they're deserving or they are of means or they are the right type of player or the right type of person. My greatest frustration with the DA in general is that this is U.S. Soccer's top-down attempt to cure a bunch of different developmental problems, and they are in the process, they put up more gates rather than solving with pragmatism, with the intervention of a neutral referee. They've become just another player in this chaotic game. Why aren't we breaking down walls and barriers and gates and opening doors? It's just one door after another, whether you want to play professionally or just want to play maximize your potential as best you can as a kid. So I get your point. I think the question is, what are the other options? What are the other options for people who are in a different reality than the one that the DA is laid out with in mind?
I mean, that's kind of a hard question to answer, and we're running very low on time in this segment. The one thing I would say is that the thing I think we need to think about is I think about Micah Richards, who used to play for Manchester City and for England, and when he was going through Manchester City's youth system, he at a certain point was considered not ready at around 15 or 16 years old. But instead of just cutting him, they sent him to a futsal school for a couple months and let him go and let him develop. And so I think you talk about gatekeepers. I think that we need to find a way to kind of get rid of the gates and the gatekeepers. And we need to develop, as you said, pathways where there are kind of central stops along the way so that these pathways become connected. And I think that U.S. Soccer is trying to get there with the idea of like national training centers. But once again, that's all through kind of the DA. But we need to have these areas where instead of just cutting kids or casting them aside, we can let them go into kind of another realm where they can continue to improve and get better and then find their way back into the fold.
Is elite youth soccer an opportunity to be provided to kids, or is it a product to be sold to kids and their parents? That's the question I would leave us with.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there and move on. But when we return, Charles Boehm is going to break some news here on SoccerWire podcast regarding perhaps a new format to the Major League Soccer Combine. The SoccerWire podcast is brought to you by PlayerMaker, the ultimate performance product for soccer teams and players. PlayerMaker is already being used by the world's top Premier League clubs, championship college teams, and now available for the youth market on a subscription basis. The PlayerMaker system records every touch of the ball and every step, providing information for coaches and players such as total touches on the ball, right and left foot touches, possession times, distance covered, sprints, and passing completion, among many others. PlayerMaker data can help coaches at every level to plan their training sessions effectively. Every player receives feedback on their personal technical and physical training goals. For a demo of PlayerMaker, visit soccerwire.com/PlayerMaker. PlayerMaker, fast track player development. Welcome back to the weekly SoccerWire podcast. We want to thank everyone who listened and commented on last week's show and encourage everyone to share, like, and subscribe, as well as reaching out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news tips, comments, and your own college commitment news. I'm here with the one, the only, the handsome Charles Boehm, and Sea-Dog, some interesting news coming from MLS headquarters regarding a possible change to the college combine. What's going on and why is this important?
We're going to keep workshopping these nicknames, Mark, and I know we're going to get to something not terrible at any moment. One of these weeks. Anyway, this is actually not from MLS headquarters just yet. I have something that is not breaking a little bit of news in this week's episode. Multiple sources tell me that pending this winter, at the end of the regular season, the typical schedule that rising talents, typically out of the college scene and elsewhere, that the way in which they enter the league is going to change a bit. The MLS Combine is dying. It will go away this winter. There will be no more MLS Combine. This is a 20-odd year tradition that in recent years became less and less about evaluating college products in this 4-day player evaluation event, and it became really, there was less emphasis on that as the draft becomes less central to roster building in the league. It became more about the networking, the deal making, the gossip and bartering that was happening between different MLS clubs in the hotel bars and on the training fields, whether it was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or more recently in Orlando. So it's an increasingly less important event in terms of talent. And it's and in light of that, the significant amount of money that the league spends on the combine has become untenable. They don't feel that there's a valid return on that investment. So the combine is going to go away. The draft will stay, but in order to still give a chance for scouts and technical staffs to look at players coming up, They're going to stage a much smaller, humbler event, sort of a combine or player ID sort of event, wherever the College Cup is, the weekend of College Cup. This year it's in North Carolina. Next year I think it's in Santa Barbara, and then the year after that it goes back to North Carolina. That will be more like 40 kids, mostly college kids, instead of the 72 or more that are a part of the combine typically. And that's going to give MLS teams a chance to look at players, including underclassmen. This is an interesting tweak. Previously, you had to basically be a special type of player who's offered a Generation Adidas contract to leave college early and go straight into MLS. They're going to give the technical staffs a chance to look at the underclassmen. If more than one, as I understand it, if more than one MLS technical staff expresses interest in making a player they see at this College Cup Combine event a first-round draft pick, that will qualify that player or start the process of signing that player to a contract. So it's a little bit of an evolution. I think that it's probably a wise move in the sense that the smart MLS coaches and scouts who are getting value from an overlooked player pool with the draft and that system are still going to be able to do it, just with less outlay by the league. And I expect that to continue, and just maybe with a little bit more freedom for players who want to join the league.
Two questions for you. First, what is this in reaction to? For me, my first thought comes to mind was the fact that teams completely passed over the college draft last year. And the second question I have for you is, what exactly is the value going to be for these players? If you are an underclassman and you get picked to go to the combine, but you don't have a good showing, based on NCAA rules and regulations, will you be able to opt not to go into the draft and be able to go back to school and play another college season afterward?
Yeah, my understanding is that this system, this tweak to the system, is going to take advantage of the NCAA rules that allow aspiring professionals to go and explore their options. It's already happening in other sports. They can explore their options for what I believe is up to a 48-hour period, do workouts, have meetings with professional teams. And then if the landscape that they see in front of them is not what they hoped it would be, they can return and continue their college career without any penalty to their eligibility. So a big issue, in years past in college basketball in the NBA was a player goes pro, loses their college eligibility, then maybe they don't get drafted in the first round, and they lose out big time, or they're facing a very short and undignified professional career. So I think that the idea here is to meet the Byzantine system of the NCAA in the middle a little bit, give these guys a chance to see what their options are, give coaches and scouts a chance to run the rule over them in a sort of a quiet setting, a setting outside of their college teams, and then see how it goes. So I think we would say that probably doing away with the draft entirely and just letting any kid sign with any team they wanted to that doesn't have, as long as there's no homegrown rights involved, would be the most freedom for aspiring kids looking to move from college to MLS. But as it is now, it's a strange deal where players can have to kind of maybe go abroad for a while, even if it's briefly, or go into USL after college if they leave early, and then go into MLS. So there was a strange limitation sort of that was put on these kids, and that's good to see that that's going to be removed.
Do you see this as being a step towards the combine's death, or do you see this as something that can perhaps resurrect the combine? I think the other thing that we talked about last week was the fact that these players are at the end of a grueling 3-month season where some of them have played up to 25 games. And so these players are coming in at a point where they can't really be their best. So I guess my other question for you is, how much do these scouts really learn about a player that they don't already know, especially considering how handicapped some of these players are coming into the combine?
Oh, I think that there'll be a chance for teams to evaluate players, but the smart ones are already doing that throughout the year or over multiple college seasons. If you're basing your draft decisions on what happens in a 5-day period at the combine, then you're probably already behind the 8 ball. You've probably screwed up somewhere along the line and shortchanged your staff, or didn't listen to your scouting staff, or don't have one in the first place. The issue with the combine is that you've got to host the venue, or have a venue. You've got to have all these hotel spaces. And when I went to the combine in years past at Fort Lauderdale, everybody was staying at a beachfront Sheraton. So you think about 75 players, you think dozens of staff, all the coaching staffs that are required to be there. There's enormous expense, and then it's not even getting into the cost of streaming the games, sort of promoting the event as an event. And that doesn't make sense in terms of the ROI you're getting on the actual amount of talent that gets drafted by the pro team and then sticks around for a year or two. There are good players. I mean, Andrei Shinyashiki, an University of Denver star in his college career, moved to the Rapids this year and put up real numbers for them as a rookie and just won the Rookie of the Year award. So players like him show you that there are gems that you can find in the college system. The question is just getting at them with a little bit less investment, a little bit less overhead.
I think, too, anytime you kind of trim the fat, especially going from maybe 72 players to 40 players, you're kind of cutting those guys out on the outside, but that might mean more quality games within the combine itself.
Well, I don't think we won't know about it, and I'm eager to see. As of now, I don't expect that people like us will get invited to this College Cup event. I think they'll want to keep it as quiet and as low pressure and low-fi as possible, because it's mainly a chance to get maybe one-on-one time. One of the interesting things they did at the Combine over the years was not just on the field and training field type evaluations and metrics, physical metrics, but they would play coaches and teams can schedule sit-down interviews where they can get into lengthy conversations with players. They want to know what makes them tick, what they're like. That's a big part of the evaluation process. That's all going to continue, just with a little bit less hype and expense.
All right, so we kind of touched on this, but just kind of to round out the segment and to end it, do you think this change is signaling the death or the resurrection of the MLS Combine?
I mean, the Combine, as we know it, is dying. The draft will survive. A big part of that is that, and this connects to our previous conversations in previous episodes on the reforms to the college season, and I think this will end up, they'll find a new sort of balance between college and pros. It's all about making the player pathway work as efficiently as possible. And there's some built-in inefficiencies in our system that can't be solved by any one or even two institutions within the system. But individual entities like MLS can make these little shifts and changes to try and make the most of things. I think it's cool to see that there will still be a draft where you'll have a MLS meetings and MLS activities will happen around the time of the United Soccer Coaches Convention, which is one of the biggest gatherings in the sport in this country and on this continent, and players that are talented enough, that show enough promise at the college and academy levels, and will get their chance to pose with a scarf and go up on the big stage, thank their families, and give us a little preview of maybe what the future stars are like. And again, for all the talk about the death of the draft system, you can look back and see a lot of big names like Clint Dempsey and more who've walked that path.
Well, if you needed another reason to listen to the SoccerWire podcast, you have it. Charles Boehm, breaking news on our show. Charles, excellent work as always. One more break, and when we return, I'll be joined by the entire SoccerWire team to discuss the first U.S. men's national team loss to Canada in 34 years. Have you ever heard a grown man cry? There's 3 of us in the studio who might be in tears. After this next segment, we'll be back. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast. And I know we are a youth soccer show, but last night was such a low point in U.S. men's soccer history that we have to talk about it. Alongside Charles Boehm, we are now also joined by producer Bridget Baker and SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer. But Charlie, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, the loss to TNT was worse because we missed out on the World Cup. But how close does last night come to reaching that kind of low point that we witnessed in Cuba 2 years ago?
I don't think it's on that level because this is CONCACAF Nations League. These are competitive matches, but they're not of the do or die variety that we saw the men struggle with in Trinidad 2 years ago. But this is a competitive game, and let's be honest. Let's be respectful to Canada. Canada were deserving winners last night. Canada are a program on the rise. They can no longer be considered a CONCACAF minnow or a team that the U.S. should comfortably beat. It's not going to be 34 years before the next time Canada beats the U.S., even if the United States continues to dwindle in their relevance and their quality. So I think we have to give respect to the victors because there's American arrogance and risk here with that.
Yeah, but I think you take away the opponent and the way that they still played, the way that they didn't attack the ball, the way that they had no ideas, the way that they looked disinterested. I think you're still at that low point no matter who the opponent is.
Yeah, and I think there's when you're trying to be a leader, and speaking of Greg Berhalter in particular here, you want to set the tone as a leader in terms of what the expectations are. That's not just in terms of your tactics and your philosophy, but also in your focus and your intensity and your dedication. And he acknowledged, even though the players and coach had talked all about how this was going to be a cup final for Canada, they're going to be intense. Canada had talked this game up. There should have been no secrets about the intensity that the Canadians were going to bring to this game, and yet still, the U.S. were lacking in soul. I thought. There's a certain, as we discussed in past episodes, there's a certain level of fight, spirit, unity that used to be the starting point for the U.S. men's national team. It was what allowed us to punch above our weight, even when the talent pool was not as deep or as carefully addressed as it is today. That has been gone for large stretches under Berhalter, and even going back under the last three coaches, going back to Arena, it deserted them at important times. It came and went in the caretaker situation of 2018 under Dave Sarachan. And then last night was finally a chance to say, okay, this is a competitive match. This matters. This affects FIFA rankings. This affects Gold Cup qualification, all these other things, and they still were sleepwalking. And Nate Scott over at USA Today, I thought had a really good explanation of it. He did a column about how this team looks like it's thinking too much. They're thinking about what they're supposed to do next. They're overcoached. Berhalter has a lot of great philosophies and a lot of great ideas, but he's not implementing them and passing them onto his team in order to make the collective work better. And then afterwards, I mean, I think he's a thinker, but he leaves me cold, and I can imagine that fans are either cold or hot based on what they hear Greg Berhalter say. After a moment like this, when you quite frankly got kicked around in a match of consequence just across the border in Canada, and he says, I wouldn't make a statement about the program based on this game. The reason why is that these games are difficult. It was never going to be easy to come here and win the game. There was no way. When you look at their team, when you look at their quality, when you look at where they are right now, it wasn't going to be an easy game. We have to accept that. Hopefully, we're going to keep improving, and hopefully, we're going to start winning games on the road, but tonight wasn't the night to do it. Now, I try to approach games like this in general not as a fan. I set aside my fan hat a long time ago for professional reasons, but I'm just startled by the limpness of those remarks. At this point, yes, it's about ideas, it's about philosophy and quality and sophistication of play. But a leader also has to lead, has to inspire. And the U.S. men's national team has done nothing to inspire the fans, much less rising generations and prospective fans, for over a year, really for 2 years now.
And speaking about how Berhalter needs to be a leader who inspires and gets everyone going, you also have to look at the players. Now, I'm stealing this from Sean Rush, who alongside Santino Quaranta is the founder of Pipeline Soccer Academy up in Baltimore. And he said, talking to Santino today, that Santino said, when he was a younger player on the U.S. national team, he was afraid to get off the bus because the players expected so much of him and put so much on his shoulder and expected him to fight and battle for every single ball that had him nervous just to even get off the bus. Do you think that everybody from Michael Bradley all the way down to especially the younger players, because that's what Santino was talking about, that experience, but do you think any of them feel that kind of responsibility, that kind of fear getting off the bus? If they do, it certainly didn't show last night.
Well, I want to be careful. You don't want to descend into sort of ad hominem attacks, because because they all value, they all know how important it is. The jersey is heavy on these guys. Intellectually, they get it. They know what they're expected to do. They know what a big deal it is. These are still players that come up in this country wanting to play for their country, working for years, decades to get to the peak of their profession, to get to put on that jersey. It's still a big deal, but I don't know. I think it's a strange, this sort of stew of history, of personalities, of lack of certain types of personalities and certain roles on the team, and then from the top down. And it's not just Berhalter that sort of has this sort of detached way about him. It's Carlos Cordero. It's the leadership of the federation. I think this is again reflective of the organizational culture that is gotten detached from its roots.
We'll now bring in SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer, and this has to be a reaction that is felt not only throughout U.S. soccer, but it trickles down to the Development Academy program and everyone involved in the youth game. What are the shockwaves felt at the lower levels, and how should coaches and players react to this situation?
Hey, Mark. Yeah, trickling down to the DA, I think if you basically say the DA is where the future national team is supposed to come from, I guess you could say that. I'd be willing to bet that half the DA kids didn't even watch the game. It's not really that big of a competition. It's brand new. It really had the feel of a friendly. They've been having trouble even selling tickets to these games. So, but if you want to look at I think the bigger picture of symbolism, it could be that these players, they look at players like Pulisic, who has become the hero of everybody, who came through the DA very briefly, but and they think he had a really bad game. So maybe they feel more like they might be able to be a lot closer to being there the next day. It probably comes just down to a thing of culture, but I would really bet that a lot of people aren't even that aware of what went on with Canada.
I mean, that's really scary to me. The fact of the matter is that, I play such a minuscule part in U.S. soccer, in being a youth coach, but at the same time, like, I feel in a way that because I'm this tiny part of the system, I somehow shoulder some of this burden. I mean, is this something that we should all just look at U.S. soccer and say all the things that we all know are being said, or is this something where I think every youth coach, everybody involved in the game in one way or another should maybe take a look at themselves and say, well, what can I do to make things better from the ground up?
Yeah, I mean, again, this one game, if you're looking at it, that is not going to have a huge reaction. If it did, that would probably be good. If Development Academy kids were picketing, saying you should have picked me, and there's all sort of hashtag leading on Twitter about this, that would be a huge sign that actually everybody is paying a lot more attention to every drop of the pin that happens with the national team program, like it does in a lot of other countries. A lot of other countries, he'd be fired, Greg Berhalter, for something like this, even though it's not that big of a competition. Whether that's right or wrong is another topic. But these coaches that are coaching in DA every day, they're so busy, but they are also so focused on, I think they already are acutely aware that the U.S. men's national team program has been underperforming expectations, with the exception of a few, good blips back in 2002 and in the Olympic run, in Australia. With the country of our size and with our number of kids playing the game and with our financial resources, it's kind of becoming a repetitive story of, and I think the coaches that are out there every day in the DA, remember, they're training 4 times a week. And they're playing 2 games on weekends sometimes. They're trying to get away from that, but it's still happening in some cases. They are trying to be part of the solution. They are all teaching players every day, and our sponsor, Player Maker kind of stuff, and the catapult devices, and all the they're professionalizing the game at a younger level because they are trying to create better players for the future. So I think they're probably actually encouraged that maybe some of their kids should have had a shot.
And let me just be clear. We talk about the DA, but I meant every coach, from DA to ECNL to WAGs to any youth club around, to the fact that I'm just somebody who sits around and talks about it and also works with younger kids trying to get them excited about it. So it's not just the DA coaches, but I wanted to expand it to everybody. But I think that is a very comprehensive answer that can expand beyond the DA. But let's actually go back into the system, because this is something that I feel is very important. The U17 World Cup is coming up. Olympic qualifying is just around the corner for the U23s, and we've failed to qualify for the last 2 Olympics. Does last night's horror show, and once again, yes, you did say it's not really a big game. The CONCACAF Nations Cup obviously isn't World Cup qualifying. And it's not just that we lost and we lost to Canada, but I'm saying this because, to me, it wasn't who we lost to or the competition. It's the manner in which we lost. It's the way in which we went down. And so, with that said, does last night's horror show heap any extra pressure on these sides, such as the U23s and the U17s, to show that the future is bright and that U.S. soccer is not, in fact, a failing program?
I think it's a good pressure, sure. I don't think those players and those coaches feel like they're carrying the burden of the nation. That again, even the Olympics will be fantastic. They absolutely need to qualify. It's really hard to qualify. There's fewer teams in the Olympics.
You also have to consider the fact that these lean years that we're going through coincided with the fact that we've missed the last two Olympics, which are major competitions similar to a World Cup, and that is really how the younger players prepare to get ready to step into that environment.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. I mean, you've got to play in big games to learn how to play in big games. Winning needs to be a habit, and playing under a lot of pressure needs to be a habit for sure.
Well, this is obviously something that we'll be watching closely, especially with the U17 World Cup coming up. And we do have to move on for now as we welcome in producer Bridget Baker with our newest batch of college commitment announcements.
Thanks, Mark, and congratulations to everyone who has reported their commitments to SoccerWire thus far in the month of October. Starting off with the class of 2020, we've got 4 commitments, starting with Riley Lewis, a forward out of Twin County Soccer Association, is committing to Delaware State University. Chris Sullivan, a defender from Richmond United, is committing to the University of Mary Washington. Nicole Angelini, a midfielder for PDA, is committing to St. Joseph's University, while off to the University of Cincinnati will be forward Bobo Kakanda. Moving on to the 2021 class, starting with goalkeeper Luke Snyder out of HMMS Eagle. He's going to High Point University. Gianna Woodfolk, defender from Richmond United, is going to University of Missouri. And Ellie Cofield, a midfielder for Beedling SC, will be off to University of Pittsburgh. And then the lone 2020 class commitment right now is Kira Watasi, the midfielder with Surf Hawaii SC. She is committing to Ohio State University.
Thank you, Bridget, and congratulations to everyone who is on their way to play soccer in college. We're rooting for you here at SoccerWire. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we will be rejoined by SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer for our segment entitled Heard on the Wire. The hat-trick episode of the SoccerWire continues right after this. SoccerWire, the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the SoccerWire podcast as we bring Chris Hummer, SoccerWire founder, back in for Heard on the Wire this week. Chris, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Mark. It's been a quiet week for the most part, at least outside of the U.S. men's national team and Canada game we've already talked so much about on this episode. But I've got just one issue, and it's not really something that happened just this week. It's a big ongoing issue that has really come to the fore for me more lately for whatever reason. It's just come across the plate a couple of times, so I thought it was a good topic. And there's a serious shortage of referees out there, and this isn't to name names or pick on any particular league, so I won't. But here in the D.C. region, there's a league that I've been involved with more recently that is they're fielding hardly any games that have a full complement of referees, meaning a center referee and both assistant referees. Most games, or not most games, I guess to be fair, but a lot of games will have only a CR and one assistant referee. And you can imagine what that might be like if the only people available, maybe they're not comfortable being in the center. Maybe you've got a 17-year-old reffing 16-year-old games or something like that. So it has to also be stressing the quality of refereeing. So this is an ongoing concern, and as long as I've been around the game, at least paying attention to anything other than just playing as a snot-nosed kid who got too many red cards myself. But, there's always a complaint about referee quality. The answer from people who are involved in the referee world is always, we don't have enough, so go learn to ref yourself and then be part of the solution instead of complaining about the problem. But it's there's a generational shift coming. And in the last 10 years, the teenagers that usually make up most of the referees and the large majority of the actual soccer that happens every Saturday or Sunday, they're gig economy kids. They grow up on an iPhone. They might not even have a laptop, and becoming a referee is extremely, extremely difficult in that an adult has trouble figuring out how to sign up for a class, where to go to class, what the rules are, where they can go from there. The whole system seems to still be run by email, and it's just very, very difficult. So there's got to be a solution to get more referees involved in the game. I don't know why one league over the other doesn't have more referees. If you go to DA, ECNL, or ECNL games, they're full. They're fine. Some of the other leagues, our recent premier partner, CCL, here in the Mid-Atlantic region, they do really well with referees. It's either the pay, or it's just really hard to figure out how to become a referee. Maybe it's the quality of the assigner that's in charge of getting referees for tournaments and games. Are they friendly? Are they responsive? This sort of thing, or is it? To some referees, they just for prestige want to be in the DA EC now, even if they pay less. I don't think they do pay less, but there's a lot of issues. The core problem definitely seems to be supply of referees.
Well, I've always wondered who wants to be a referee and why would you want to be a referee? I mean, especially youth sports are the absolute worst. To be completely honest with you, I sometimes hate attending youth games just because I can't stand the things that parents are saying to these referees. And you have to think, okay, they're not refereeing an MLS game. They're like 17 or 18. It's probably their like 9th game. And they say like, come on, ref, you're being paid. You got to do this. Yeah, they're getting paid like $15 a game to get abused by you. So I think one is that, parents, and you know what? I was really bad as a player, and I would, talk to the referee the entire game and was really disrespectful. So, I'm part of the problem, but I think that parents really kind of need to shut up and understand where the referees are coming from. But I think part of it is that I think kids look at these days and say, why would I want to be a referee?
Well, if they don't look at it ahead of time thinking that, it's certainly a case, and I don't know the stats on this, but for all I was explaining about how hard it is to become a referee, and both of my kids did this, and my new stepson had done it as well, is they go through all the hassle of becoming a referee and learning how to communicate on email like an adult to be able to get some of these assignments, and they show up and there's nobody there. There's no mentor. There's nobody holding their hand. There's no real orientation for them. And then they get yelled at by parents. And added to the problem is sometimes it takes 2 months to get paid. So they go out in the rain for $15 for a game. They're like little lost sheep, and they're not comfortable because they haven't reffed very many games. And then they actually don't get the instant gratification that it's a problem. So it's certainly has to be why we don't have more referees. It's hard enough to get them in the system with our archaic systems. We should be making every effort to keep them in, and it's certainly not happening in very many places. One final note on this, though, we're talking about, it's really easy to talk about all the things that are wrong, and there are a lot of people that do things really well, and most people that are signers or referee mentors or people in charge, they really care. They really want to solve the problem. When they finally get a hold of the kids, they do everything they can. I think there's a systemic issue bigger that needs solved, but we can get into more of that later. One organization I really want to point out that's doing it right is this past weekend was Columbus Day weekend. There was huge tournaments all over the country, and one of the biggest ones historically, this is for girls only, is the WAGS tournament held here in the D.C. area. They've been going since, I believe, 1975, and they reinstituted something they had done a few years ago, which is a referee mentor program. Referees from all over the country, probably international, attended the entire tournament, and they mentored the girls and boys referees that were in this big tournament. It was led by Carrie Seitz, a 4-time World Cup referee, and another great referee that was involved was Christina Unkel, who those of you who watched the Women's World Cup this past summer on Fox, she was the sort of resident referee analyst with all the VAR that was going on. So, WAGs certainly did not hold back on doing everything they could to take the referees that they were able to get and to help them become better on their own. So definitely a big shout out to the WAGs organization and Lula Bauer and the whole board for bringing that back, and I'm sure it'll help the game long term. Before I go, just one more thing. This isn't anything about referees, but and he won't hear this till tomorrow, but I just wanted to say happy 19th birthday to my son, Ben. I love you, buddy.
For Ben at UVA, that one's for you. Happy birthday from not only your dad, but from all of us at SoccerWire. Well, the time has come. It's the end of the show. For coverage of everything youth soccer, be sure to check SoccerWire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter at @TheSoccerWire, or hop on over to SoccerWire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. And every Thursday we put out our national soccer recruiting and tournament wire. And for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on SoccerWire.com to get the best of SoccerWire.com in your inbox. That will do it for this edition of the SoccerWire podcast. Episode number 3 is in the books, and we hope you enjoyed it. For Quinn Castile, Charles Boehm, Chris Hummer, and our wonderful producer, Bridget Baker, I'm Mark Serber saying thank you for joining us on the SoccerWire podcast.